Your wound, your pain is not a world view. All men cheat. Have you ever had that, said that, or even believed that? Because what you believe will always shape what you receive. Heal that wound, heal that narrative. Don't wear it as your worldview. Hey, friend, welcome back to another episode of the Rise and Rebuild podcast. This is your host, Lydia, and I am so glad you joined me today. If this is your first time here, welcome home. This is your space to break unhealthy cycles, heal what still hurts, and rebuild. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the incredible messages from last week's episode. I love this community so much, and I will keep showing up for you guys. Okay? So today's episode, let me be honest, I debated the title because it's very provocative. Intentionally so, because I need you to engage with me honestly. The title today is All Men Cheat. Have you ever had that, said that, or even believed that? I want you to be honest with yourself. And today we are going to unpack that statement and title, where it comes from, what it does to us when we hold it, and what God actually says is possible for the men in your life and the relationships you are building. This is not a debate episode. It's not a man bashing episode either. And it's not a naive, everything is fine episode. No, it's a healing episode, and a healing episode that is going to require us to say the truth. It may make you uncomfortable, but that's why I'm here. So come on in. Before we talk about men, I want us to talk about something that lives much closer to home. I want to talk about what's happening inside of you, specifically the narrative you've been carrying about men, because what you believe will always shape what you receive. The narrative you're allowing about men is going to shape your reality. What you believe about men will continue to determine what and who you attract, what and who you accept, what and who you expect in your life. If you need to, listen to me again. Not what men actually are, not the objective truth about every man on earth, but what you believe, your internal narrative, the story you tell yourself when you go on a date, when you enter a relationship, when you watch your partner pick up his phone at night. That belief is quietly shaping your experience in ways you may not even be aware of. So if you walk through life genuinely believing that all men cheat, that it's only a matter of time, that men are simply wired for unfaithfulness, that all men are polygamous, then one of two things are going to happen. Either you'll attract men who confirm that belief, or you will find evidence of it in the men who don't actually deserve that label. Because our minds are very powerful filters. We tend to see what we expect to see. We find what we go looking for, not because we're weak, but because that is how human perception works. When a belief is lodged deep down your brain, deep enough, it stops feeling like an option. It starts feeling like facts. It starts feeling like wisdom, like this is the truth. And that is exactly where it becomes dangerous at all levels. Now, I want to acknowledge that some men do cheat. This is not about victim blaming, because I know that many of you who are carrying this belief did not arrive here carelessly. You have been hurt. You've been cheated on. You've been lied to. You've been betrayed by someone who looked you in the eye and made a vow that they would never, ever lie to you. They made a promise they never intended to keep. Maybe it has happened more than once. Maybe it has happened with the person you trusted the most. That is real pain, and I want to acknowledge that. And I want to honor that and not dismiss it. But here's what I also need you to hear me today. Your wound, your pain is not a world view. What happened to you, as devastating as it was, as painful as it was, as hurtful as it was, is not the whole truth about all men everywhere. It is your story. It is your pain. It is your experience. But it is not the universal verdict of every man who will ever walk into your life. And when we allow our wounds and pains or painful moments to become worldviews or the way we see the world, we do lasting damage to ourselves and to every relationship we enter from that point forward. We walk in with the verdict already decided. We demand that every new person continue to prove themselves over and over again against an impossible standard. We become too hypervigilant. We become too nosy, and we continue to wonder why we can't seem to connect, to trust, or to receive love. Listen, you will not be able to receive a faithful man if you've already decided somewhere deep in your spirit that faithful men do not exist. It's not going to happen. So the first thing you have to do today is look at that narrative, name it, trace it, where is it coming from, and decide consciously, deliberately from today whether you want to keep it or not. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend the narrative came from nowhere, as I've said. No, let us be honest about both sides of the reality. And one of those sides is, yes, some men cheat, and the other one, some men don't. Let me be real with you, because I'm not here to blow sunshine and pretend unfaithfulness doesn't exist. There are some men who cheat. Absolutely. I know that. We know this. It's all over the news. It's documented. It's lived. It's in the statistics. It's in the stories we hear. It's in the tears that have been cried by real women in real pain. I am not dismissing a single one of those stories. They matter. But here's the equally true statement that often gets swallowed by the noise of collective pain. There are also men who do not cheat, who have walked planet Earth, who continue walking on this planet, and who will ever walk this planet. There are men who have been presented with every opportunity to be unfaithful, the late nights, the temptations, the business travels, but they have chosen quietly and without applause to say no. Not because the opportunity was not there, not because they were somehow immune to attraction, but because their commitment, their character, and their covenant meant more to them than a moment of gratification. Yes, those men exist. I know them personally. You probably know them too, if you stop and think carefully. There's a friend's husband who has been married for 20 plus years and still looks at his wife like she's the only one in the room. There's a father who's built his family brick by brick on faithfulness. There's a man who's walked away from something that could have destroyed everything he has built because he knew what was at stake and he chose his family anyway. Those men exist. Those men are there. But if we use our pain and the wound to blind that, then when we say that all men cheat, we arrest them. We disrespect their integrity. We disqualify their character before they have even opened their mouths to speak. We condition ourselves to distrust them from their first conversation. And then we wonder why every relationship begins with suspicion and ends in a self-fulfilling prophecy. That is not wisdom, my friends. You're not being wise. You're just building a wall. And you've listened to me before. I've said walls do not protect you from heartbreak. They don't let the wrong ones in and keep the right ones through. They keep out everyone, including the people God has prepared for your life. And the goal is not to become naive. The goal is to become discerning. There's a vast difference between you being wise and a belief system that has already issued a verdict before even the trial begins. One of those protects you, the other one isolates you, and you know the difference, okay? So if the question is not whether faithful men exist, because they do, the next question then becomes, what makes a man faithful? What is actually holding him? Because I think when we start to understand that, we change the narrative. We change the narrative because for so long, so many of us have the wrong narrative about men. And as I said, I'm not excusing bad behavior from some men who cheat. There are absolutely some men who cheat. But also on the other side of the coin, that there are also men who don't cheat. So back to faithfulness. So why do some men stay faithful? Because faithfulness is not about goodness. It's about submission. We often frame faithfulness as a personality trait. He's a good man. He won't cheat. He's a bad man, so he will cheat. So we reduce faithfulness to just character type and move on. But I want to offer you a different framework today. One that I believe is more honest, more nuanced, and ultimately more helpful in my own belief. A man doesn't stay faithful simply because he's good. No, he stays faithful because he's submitted. And I know we always talk about women submitting, but what are men submitted to? They're submitted to God, to their own integrity, to the covenant they made, not just the feeling they had on the wedding day, but the vow itself, the weight of that promise. Now, when I say submitted to God, I also want you to be very careful, because I'm not just talking about church attendance, men who go to church, or a man who just talks about God. I'm not talking about a man who is a Christian or who has a Christian title in his bio, but whose actions tell a completely different story. Plenty of people are carrying a label they have not lived into. That is not what I mean. What I mean is a man whose inner life is genuinely anchored in something greater than himself. A man whose decision making is shaped not just by what he wants in a given moment, but by who he knows he's accountable to. A man who genuinely walks with God, not perfectly, but consistently, not just in public, but even in those private moments where no one is watching and every option is available, when the temptation is there. Because the truth is, feelings do change. Feelings fluctuate with circumstances, with seasons, with loneliness, with proximity and opportunity. So a man who is relying solely on how he feels to stay faithful will eventually find himself in a moment where his feelings are pointing in the wrong direction and nothing in him says stop. But a man who's submitted to God has something that does not move when his feelings do. He has an anchor, an internal standard that holds even when everything around him and everything in him is pulling him towards a different choice. That is what I call the God factor. And it is the most reliable foundation for faithfulness that I know of. So men do not cheat because they are good. They just don't cheat because they're submitted to God, to their own integrity. And this is why when you're choosing a partner, the question, does he go to church or is he a good man, is not sufficient. The real questions are deeper. Is he submitted? Does his private life reflect what he says in public? Is there fruit that you can actually see, observe, consistency in how he treats people when there's nothing to gain? Does he answer to something higher than himself, than his own desires? That man, not a perfect man, but a submitted man, is the man who will stay faithful, not because he was never tempted, but because he has now built his life around a standard that does not bend to temptation. The God factor. And I know exactly what some of you are thinking, because when I was thinking about this episode, I thought about King David. This is a man that was submitted to God. This is a man that God called a man after my own heart, a man after God's own heart. But he was also tempted. He wrote the Psalms that we read and pray over our lives, but he still cheated and did far worse than even cheating. So what do we do with that story, and how do we start to think about it in the context of a man that is submitted to God but still cheats? David should not be an excuse that even the men submitted to God cheat. They do, yes. And the goal here is to find a man that is submitted, that returns to God, that acknowledges their humanity, that acknowledges that they too can be tempted and still return to God. So ask yourself, what narrative are you carrying around about men? Where did that actually come from? Is that protecting you, or is it preventing you from receiving something good? Is that preventing you from actually receiving and accepting good men? Because there are men out here that are genuinely good people, that are genuinely faithful. And do you actually believe that God has created or can create faithful men? Can you hold space for that possibility? Even if you haven't seen it yet, think about it. They are. I can confirm that. Yes. So, just to answer my question, when we started, all men cheat? No, they don't. Not all men cheat. Some do, but not all men cheat. And so, here's what I want to leave you with today. What you're going to believe is what becomes your reality. If you believe all men cheat, you'll continue to live in constant suspicion. You'll self-protect in ways that quietly continue to sabotage every connection before it becomes something good or before it even has a chance to grow. You will hold every man at arm's length and think you're wise, when really it's a wound in disguise. And that wound will keep you company for a very long time if you let it. But if you choose to believe with your eyes open and your discernment sharp and your healing in progress, that faithful, submitted, God fearing men exist, you, my friend, are opening yourself to actually recognizing one when he shows up. You're giving yourself permission to receive what God has said is possible. I want you to heal that wound, heal that narrative. Don't wear it as your worldview. Don't use it as the lens through which you observe men. All right, my friend? So not all men cheat. Some men don't. And that one that does not cheat is your portion. Okay? Go ahead and share this with someone who needs permission to believe that again and to drop the narrative that all men cheat, because they don't. They don't. Not all do. Until next time, keep rising, keep rebuilding, and keep becoming the woman you are always meant to be. Ciao. Talk soon. Bye bye.